Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to another episode of Avalon's Review. I'm your boy Chris Avalon, and what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to give you my review of this past Tuesday's episode of Pose. We are finally in the new season. Season 2 is finally here. I'm excited. Been waiting for this show and anticipating it for so long. Excuse me. And what I love is that shout out to FX for finally putting so much money and promotion behind. Let me fix my honey. Okay. Shout out to FX for putting so much money and promotion behind this show, because this show I've always felt was like the little engine that could, and I love it so much because it just like it hits close to home in a lot of ways. It's like, while I never partook in the ballroom scene, I do know a lot of people who are a part of the ballroom scene. And to see that these lives are being portrayed on TV, and that these, trans people of color, gay people of color are getting finally the recognition and the platform they deserve beyond Paris is Burning, beyond so many other documentaries that we had. It's just awesome, and I'm just really excited about this new season. So without further ado, let's get right into it. First things first, we're transported into 1990. When we were first, if you saw this first season, which is on Netflix, by the way, if you haven't seen it, why haven't you? Head over to Netflix and binge watch season 1 before you get into this review or whatever. But took place in, what was it? It was like 87 to 89, I believe. So now, season 2, we're transported into 1990, which is at the highlight of the height of Vogue. Madonna's big, huge single, which was about voguing and the whole ballroom culture. But before we get into that part, we're transported into a more serious, somber time when Blanca and Pray Tell wind up taking a boat to Hart's Island, which is sort of like a potter's field for gay people who were dying of AIDS. It was this no man's land of boxes with numbers on it, where they just stuck a bunch of dead bodies in there, and you were basically a number. They didn't have a name. They didn't have you, give you a proper burial, because I believe that this was, well, not believe, it was a time where people didn't know what was going on with the whole AIDS epidemic. We had a president, Ronald Reagan, which I don't understand why. I don't want to get too political, but I don't understand why people praise that man. Him and his wife completely ignored people who were dying of this disease, did not lift a finger or even acknowledge people. They even had a friend, one of their good friends, Rock Hudson, had the virus, died of AIDS, and they kept it a big old secret and pretty much just kind of turned their nose up at him. That's supposed to be your friend, but okay. The history is that, the tea is out there. If y'all want to do the research, it's there. But so they go to Hart Island, and they're going to visit Pray Tell's friend Keenan. Speaking of which, sidebar, whatever happened to the dude that he was dating last season? It would have been nice to kind of find out what went on with that story, like what happened with that relationship, but I digress. Let's just focus on what was happening. So, watching that scene, it hit me. Not that I experienced it, because I was way too young at that time. Like, I was literally in elementary school when all this was happening, when the whole big AIDS epidemic, so I wasn't aware of it. But seeing this play out firsthand it made me realize how far we've come in the whole AIDS crisis and this, like, everything that's been happening with that. So shout out to Brian Murphy and his whole writing team for putting all of this and incorporating this into the show and really educating a lot of the viewers who weren't around at that time or don't remember that time, or people who survived what some of my older gay friends have called the AIDS Holocaust, could watch and witness and go back and remember. So seeing those beats in there and the huge amount of detail that they paid attention to in this season so far, kudos to you guys for that. Like, while you're entertaining us with the balls and the pops and the dips and the spins, and I live for that, and I live in the category is, and I live for Pray Tell and the reads and all that other stuff, it's also good to counterbalance it with the dramatic beats as well. So I'm really enjoying the fact that we're throwing a lot of education into the show, because quiet as it's kept, a lot of the younger generation coming up, they don't know about their queer history. A lot of people don't really read or pay attention to that stuff. So the only time, sorry to say, that people pay attention to stuff that's going on you got to put it in a TV show. You got to put it on a reality show. You got to throw it in Drag Race. You got to throw it in these things for people to kind of be aware and realize, because people don't read no more. Well, I'm not going to say everybody, but majority of people don't take the time to read and educate themselves in that way. So to see it in a TV show, kudos to you guys for that. Okay, so Blanca going to the doctor and visiting the nurse Judy. Shout out to the writers for incorporating Sandra Bernhard into the show more. I've always been a fan of Sandra Bernhard from back in the days when she was on, when she played Nancy on Roseanne. I just love the fact that they've incorporated in the show, because in real life she's a political activist. She's been out there fighting the fight for the LGBT LMNOP community. So to see her get a more prominent role in this show, I'm so happy that they've decided to incorporate her more. And when Blanca goes to the doctor, and shout out and a huge RIP to St. Vincent's Hospital. Thank God y'all brought that hospital up, because that hospital played a prominent role in, a lot of people who were HIV positive and were dying and all other stuff. So, and it was in the West Village, but now it's been torn down and turned to another goddamn condominium. So, as everything, if you're living in New York, thank God I left. I live in LA now. But, if you live in New York, it's either, things have been, prominent buildings have been turned either into a new condominium for rich folks or a CVS or another damn bank. It is what it is. So Blanca finding out that her T cells were below 200, and then finding out that her diagnosis immediately went from HIV to AIDS. I don't want to get too personal. This has nothing to do with me personally, because, I'm negative. I get texted all the time and all other stuff. Even, and I do have a lot of sex. I don't want to get too, into my personal business. But this just hit me because there was someone who was very close to me who I remember telling me that they had AIDS, and that feeling that I got, and like the tears of crying and feeling sad and like, oh my God, you're going to die and all this other stuff. And to see how further we've come now with medications and other stuff. The person who told me this is still around, but just seeing like the medications and everything is working, and like how far we've come with that progress of medications for HIV positive people or people who have full-blown AIDS is amazing. It also got me into my activism when I worked for the AIDS Center of Queens County in New York, and working with them, and also going out and giving out condoms and teaching about protecting yourself when, I would go to gay clubs in Queens and all these other places, and being out there and protesting and getting more into political activism. And now from going from that to using this, my YouTube channel and my radio show on alldigitalradio.com every Saturday, 2 to 4, Eastern Standard Time, by the way. Using that platform to educate and to push forward LGBTQ issues, and the fact that people need to kind of be more aware of what's going on in the world. We still have a long way to go. This is why I do this. It's like there's so many other ways you could do your political activism, and just seeing like this happening with Blanca, and then her taking her life into her own hands and realizing she's got to stay alive for her kids. She's got to lay down a foundation for her children, from the house of Evangelista. Her being the mother of the house, like making sure her kids are set and that their dreams are being realized. So that way, when she's gone, they're able to move on and prosper without her. Just seeing that fight within her was amazing. Vogue going mainstream, courtesy of Madonna's single. I liked it. I love the fact that they have incorporated Madonna into this. And for people who I saw, like I was seeing a couple things, like Madonna dropped her new album this week. Her 14th album, but that's neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is that when Madonna did play a huge role in the gay rights movement, her losing a lot of friends at that time, including the artist Keith Haring. You've heard her say this story many times, and people dismissing her as, oh, she's a mediocre artist, or she's this, or she's that, and why are people trying to give her so much credit? Madonna's never always tried to act like she invented Vogue. She has never said that she's invented Vogue. She was inspired by it. She loved that whole style. I mean, with her, of course, incorporating people from that scene to go with her on tour, and then also to be in Truth or Dare. Like Jose Extravaganza is in Pose. You saw him quite a few times if you watch this episode. He appears at the end when they're dancing and Pray Tell gives that little education about Crystal LaBeija. If you don't know who Crystal LaBeija is, I suggest you watch the documentary The Queen, where she goes off on that poor little white girl Harlow. And that whole situation where it was like a lot of shit was going on with those pageants, where she felt they were being racist towards her, and the foundation of why they created the ballroom scene for queer people of color, because those balls that they were competing in the 60s were not acknowledging these girls. They weren't winning the trophies. They weren't being acknowledged. People were looking at them like, oh, well, you know what? We're gonna let you sit up in here and compete, but we're not gonna give you trophies. So it's like, well, fuck you, bitch. If you're not gonna let me win a trophy fair and square and on my own merit by showing that I have talent, then I'm gonna go somewhere where I'm wanted, and I'm gonna create this platform. And that's what people like Crystal LaBeija and so many other queens did, and then Paris Dupree bringing the whole voguing style into that underground situation. And if you don't know who Paris Dupree is, I suggest you watch Paris is Burning, because she's all over it. I love every now and again when I see the voguing and stuff and I'm watching, I go, Dupree, 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 Dupree. Okay, let me stop. Seeing that, like the whole Vogue thing, and then Madonna bringing it into the mainstream and it becoming this thing, and then I'm wondering if they'll even bring up Paris is Burning, because this is around the time when Paris is Burning was released. So I wonder if they're going to bring that up, or they're just going to kind of go off and do their own thing, because I know, like, while the show is heavily influenced by Paris is Burning, they don't want to make it sort of a Paris is Burning knockoff, which certain friends of mine, who I won't mention because I no longer speak to them, would like to kind of paint this show with, oh, you're just a Paris is Burning retread. Girl, bye. I feel like the show is more than that. I think it's based on a lot of people. Like, when I look at Pray Tell, he's clearly based on Junior LaBeija. Opulence, you own everything, everything is yours. Like that Junior LaBeija. And then, when I look at Angel, who's now pursuing a modeling career, I look at her as someone who is a cross between Venus Extravaganza and who else did I say that she reminds me of? Because I was like drawing a blank on her. Octavia St. Laurent. Like, that's what she reminds me of. A combination of both. Someone's like, oh, well, she's more like Venus. I'm like, well, girl, I don't think Venus ever tried to be a model. Venus was somebody who liked being pretty and wanted to be a housewife, if you watch the documentary. Or based on what we saw in the documentary, maybe she did want to be a model. I don't know that, but that wasn't incorporated in the Paris is Burning documentary. But when I look at Venus is more like a housewife, whereas Octavia wanted to be a fashion model. And we see in this episode that India Moore's character Angel is trying to pursue that career as a fashion model. So yeah, I like the idea of her pursuing a modeling career. I was like trying to say, like, okay, I understand it's a TV show, and then we do take certain things from the show, accuracies about the AIDS virus and ACT UP, which kudos to you guys for bringing up ACT UP. And Nurse Judy basically getting Pray Tell to become an activist because he was seeing so many of his friends dying, and him getting upset at my favorite bitches on the show, because they are, I love that they provide the shadiness and the cattiness. Not Judy. Candy. Because you guys say it like Pray Tell. Miss Candy. So it's like Candy and Lulu, how they're being shady up in the church, and then Pray Tell having to read their asses because they being disrespectful. At a funeral of another friend dying, because they've been going to so many damn funerals and people dropping like flies. That's how serious it was back in the day, and the government pretty much turning their back on us and being like, you know what, let the AIDS Holocaust wipe their asses out. Which is why I was glad to see that Judy took Pray Tell to his first ACT UP meeting, and you saw, like, a lot of people don't even want to say this or admit it, but yes, the lesbians were the ones who were taking care of a lot of these gay men who were dying. The lesbians were the ones who got ACT UP up and running and were out there fighting that good fight and willing to lay out in the churches and on the streets and willing to get dragged by the police and arrested and beat and all that other shit, just so that way they could be taken seriously. And so I love the die-in that they did at the church, and the fact that they were out there and they were throwing their fists up and they were chanting and protesting, and just seeing that just brought so much emotion to me. So seeing that was just awesome. Fresh Faces modeling. The fact of Angel making the semifinals, and the fact that she is so gorgeous, and the fact that when you look at her, she's not someone who's clockable. But one of the photographers, because Angel couldn't afford to get her, pay for the photos to make the trial. And that reminded me of that scene when Octavia goes to the competition in the mall, and she runs into, well, not runs into, but she's behind the table. Shari Headley, who y'all know used to be on All My Children, and Coming to America. She basically was what she was the one that that married Eddie Murphy, right? I think, because it's been so long since I've seen Coming to America, but I know she was in the movie. Um, Seeing Shari Headley behind the table and that sort of thing, and it kind of reminded me of that from Paris is Burning. So there were little trinkets that I did notice from Paris is Burning that was in there, but it seemed like the show was taking it further, and it's like she's going to be able to pursue this career. However, semicolon, she runs into a photographer who works for the company that has clocked Angel and has seen her on the piers, which I did skip over something where Angel was down on the pier and she was trying to, turn tricks, because quiet as it's kept, a lot of the trans girls aren't able to get jobs. So they have to work the booths or work 42nd Street in those little private dancer booths, or they have to prostitute themselves because no place is going to hire them. I mean, you saw what Blanca had to deal with when she wanted to go to an ACT UP meeting or ACT UP protest, and the ignorant Asian nail lady basically told her that nobody's gonna hire you because you're trans and so on and so forth. So she quit and went to the meeting, and now what we see in what's going to be coming up is that now we know the role that Patti LuPone is going to be playing in the show, because she's some rich woman who Blanca basically wants to buy a space to open up her own nail salon. So hopefully we see that, and then what would be cool if they decide to go in that direction, that we could see Blanca basically open up this shop and hire other trans women and people within the community who can't get jobs, and they can work for her at her nail spot. So that would be actually cool if we could have something like that in the future. So yeah, so Angel getting clocked by the photographer, and the fact that he kind of made her feel humiliated, because she's thinking, and I knew it was coming, like, I think it was pretty predictable when we watched this, that it was just like Angel's on cloud nine and she's taking all these fabulous photos and she's feeling her oats and she's living her best life. And then all of a sudden he's like, well, I seen you down at the at the pier, and he knew the type of girl she was, and he wanted to get pictures of her naked pleasuring herself. And we all know, like, if you're a trans person, they don't equate who they are by their genitalia, and for people to constantly always play into that like it's like there's some sort of fetish, I just felt for Angel in that part. So kudos in like skipping beyond to when she finally told, when she won that trophy and she was feeling all down and depressed, and she told Blanca and Poppy what happened, and Poppy beat his ass. I was living for that, and we all saw, like, within this episode when he's taking pictures and he's giving her compliments. Poppy, I'm talking about. When Poppy is giving her compliments and talking about, oh, you're so beautiful and you have what it takes, and being her cheerleader, we basically see this blossoming relationship between these two. And yes, quiet as is kept, children within houses do get together and they do fornicate and they do form relationships, sexual ones. So yes, glad to see this side being explored. The dying at the Catholic Church, I feel like I've already spoken on that. Seeing that, I mean, I never witnessed it. I've seen I remember I would see like clips on TV of what was going on, but I was too young to understand what I was watching. And so seeing this out in the forefront in a television setting definitely hit me hard, because it's like, while I can't relate to that because I was too young, I can understand it and relate to it now because I'm older and I'm aware of what's going on and how far we've come. Pray Tell reading Elektra at the ball for that guillotine, whatever the hell that was going on. That read was, girl, he read her ass from cover to cover, put her ass back, that book that he read from beginning to end and in between and back and forwards, back on the shelf, someone else to read her ass. That read was just team too much. I live for Pray Tell, but that read was a lot. And I understood where he was coming from, because he's angry and he wants these kids to wake up. Like, you have to think beyond the trophies. It can't only be about, oh, I'm going to snatch a trophy. And it's like, what are you planning on doing beyond this? Because when this gets a little old and you get a little too old to be walking the runway for the same categories and winning trophies, what are you doing with yourself? And for her to not see that was interesting. and was typical Elektra, because we all know Elektra's a little superficial and she only cares about herself for the most part. So, and then also being curious is like, how is she able, like, okay, she works at Indochine as a host, hostess, tomato, and people who stand at the front desk, she was a hostess. Um, how's she making her money? And I guess we'll find out in future episodes how she's able to afford all these lavish furs, but she can't pay her damn rent, which Blanca got on her about. And then they had this big fight at the dinner table because Alexa's been missing too many dinner meetings and she's been off doing her own thing. And she got into a big fight and flipped the table. Speaking of which, I thought that during this hiatus, that Dominique, and girl, we know, we go way back from our, the days of Langston's and Two Potato and all those other black gay establishments in the West Village and beyond. Girl, I thought you'd been taking some damn acting lessons on your hiatus. To me, it was like, while she has improved in a lot of ways, she was still giving them that one note, monotonous scream type of delivery. And it was like, why didn't y'all tell, like, Ryan, why didn't y'all be like, girl, get your ass in an acting class? Like, but that's like a little nitpick. I can still, I still live for Dominique. I still, AKA, as I've always known as her, Tyra Lore. But yeah, that's like my little nitpick. But other than that, it's just like, I was expecting a lot more from the acting, but we all can't be Meryl Streep. So, oh yeah, we talked about Poppy beating up the photographer and the blossoming relationship. So, okay. So now, with that fight happening with Blanca and the whole, and Elektra and her cussing everybody out and flipping the table and leaving, like, pulling with Teresa Giudice, I didn't see that coming with Elektra joining the House of Ferocity. I don't know why I didn't see that, but speaking of which, whatever happened to all them other members? I just felt like all I saw was the two members of the House of Ferocity were the mothers. Were Candy and Lulu. Like, where was everybody? I didn't see nobody competing. If I wasn't paying, let me know if I wasn't paying attention or if I missed something. Because whatever happened to the other house members that was with them? What happened to Jiggly Caliente and that extra gut that she be having that looked like it's hanging over her knees? Like, what happened to her and the other one, Aphrodite? Like, what happened to all the people that were they so irritated by the mother too that they all was like, bye bitch, like, we're gonna be a 007 and we're not gonna be a part of the house. 007 is basically, for those who don't know, is someone who is an orphan, basically. Someone who has not been claimed by a house. That's basically what a 007 is, for those of you who didn't know what that is. It'll be interesting to see how far that goes and how those three characteristics, because we all know that's going to be a recipe for disaster. To have Elektra, Candy, and Lulu. And, okay, so who's going to actually be, since they're the house mothers, and then they have Elektra coming in, Elektra's not going to kind of bow down and be, take a step back. There's going to be too many egos clashing. So that's going to be a recipe for disaster. I can just see that coming. Yeah, so we already talked about Jose Extravaganza and what a big prominent role he's been playing in this show, and the homage to Paris Dupree and giving the education about voguing. Overall, I want to say that was a great season premiere. I'm definitely loving it. I'm liking where we're going with this show. I love that we're balancing the serious with the fun. I'm also happy, I have to say this too, that we have gotten rid of that Donald Trump angle that we had from last season. I feel like now that we're doing this, that from last season was the weaker part. We didn't need Stan and the whole thing. I mean, yeah, we do need to talk about those stories, because there are the rich white boys who, they wear their penny loafers and their khakis and their, three-piece suits or whatever you want to call it. And they do kind of come down to the projects and they pick up the girls and they go off and they have them as a little secret because they're like a woman with a little something extra or whatever the case is. So the fact that we didn't incorporate that whole, not that scene per se, because that is a topic that needs to be talked about straight men who fetishize trans women. I do like that story, and I'm glad it was told last season, but I'm also glad they removed that whole people trying to survive in the whole Donald Trump world thing, because I felt like it felt like two different shows almost. It felt like that world just didn't fit in with this. So I like the fact that they're focusing more on the characters, the Vogue scene, these queer characters of color who are just trying to make it in this crazy world called life and trying to just make something of themselves. So I'm glad that we're going to focus on these central characters. Maybe they could bring more characters in and, to interact with them and all this other stuff. But overall, I have to say I'm thoroughly enjoying this season so far, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where they're going to go and take the series. And I'm hoping that it's on, from now, it's only way to keep going is up. It's not, I don't feel so far we are having a sophomore slump with it. I just feel like they kicked the door in. We're heading out of the gate, guns blazing, and because, quiet as it's kept, there's a lot of situations where sometimes you'll watch a Ryan Murphy show, it starts out great, and then it starts to teeter down. We've seen it happen with Glee. We've seen it happen with American Horror Story, where it has its ups and downs. We've seen it happen with so many of his shows. So I'm just hoping that they continue to do their homework, they continue to enrich these characters. And shout out to MJ Rodriguez, who's definitely been turning it with the acting this season so far. Like, she's really been pushing in regards to the acting, and I'm really rooting for her to win an MTV Movie and TV Award, which I think happens this weekend. I don't remember, but I know it's sometime. I think it is this weekend that's going to happen, so I'm really rooting for her to win. And kudos to seeing her be honored at the Puerto Rican Day Parade, which is this past week. So, with that being said, thank you all for watching this episode. I will be bringing you recaps of this every week. So definitely tune in, leave your comments, let me know what you thought about this episode, what you would like to see, what you thought. Give me your thoughts, your likes, click, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Love you all for watching. Ciao, darlings.